Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. I am Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here as always with Gunnar Amelunk. Gunnar, how you doing?
Doing good. I've been ready for the week to be over. I'm kind of hanging on by a thread, but rumors were going around, Spencer, that you were so excited for this podcast that you were throwing up and just couldn't wait to record this week. So, how are you doing?
It's true. I couldn't keep anything down on Tuesday because I couldn't wait to record this on Thursday. No, I'm I'm doing a lot better than I was earlier in the week, I'll tell you that much. No, we leave for our first kind of games tomorrow, so I'm excited to get that going for our college season, but otherwise, not my favorite week overall, but we got some Bucks to talk about. So, before we get into any of that, if you are listening and haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you're listening on. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And then, as I just mentioned, today is going to be a Bucks focused episode. And despite this being a week off, Gunner, it was actually pretty eventful, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had a lot to talk about for sure tonight. So, what we're going to be talking about, we did sign Danilo Gallinari. We'll break that down, what he means to the team and all that. We also signed Ryan Rollins, not Ryan Hollins. We don't like Ryan Hollins here. Ryan Rollins to a two-way deal. We're going to have a Khris Middleton injury update as well as talking about Damian Lillard's eventful All-Star weekend. We got some comments from Shaq to Dame that we enjoyed, and we're going to break down kind of what that means for us. JJ Redick had made the news sphere, I guess you could say, and he had some comments too about Doc Rivers. We'll break that down because that hit the Twitter sphere. Like I said, it went pretty crazy online. And then we'll wrap it up with some Giannis documentary talk. And we were really excited about watching that. So we got a lot to say about that. So Spencer, we'll start it out with Danilo Gallinari. For those who don't know and want a jersey, he will be wearing number 12. So get your Danilo Gallinari jerseys hot. They are hot and ready. Uh, so Spencer, what do you think he will bring to the team? Really, we'll start positive first because we probably know the actual negative here, but what do you think he'll actually bring to help us?
Yeah, I mean, he's still a capable shooter. Really, he's a capable scorer still. He's not obviously the athlete he was at one point in his prime, but he can take you into the post and score. The Bucks have seen him do it the last few years when he has been healthy. Still, he'll take you into the post and shoot over the top of you. And he's still got a little bit of like first step quickness to him, and he's a smart offensive player. Um, I mean, that's mostly what you're getting is going to be the offensive end. I think him and Bobby are kind of redundant, which is why the signing is a little weird to me in terms of like they kind of do the same things. I would say Gallinari to me is probably the smarter player overall, especially on the offensive end. I don't think he'll take as many forced shots, if you will, but I think he's probably a little bit better passer. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you got anything to add on the positives, but negatively, we've got plenty to talk about there too. But anything you want to add first?
I talked about the bench scoring. I think he'll, like you mentioned, he's still a very capable shooter and he's not afraid to shoot. So just providing that bench scoring that we definitely needed. Again, I don't know if he could be playing with Bobby Portis, like you also mentioned. It's just going to be hard to fix sort of our rotations. I don't really see him fixing or fitting in necessarily without making it work kind of weird. But if he could replace Bobby minutes, I'll definitely take that. You might be seeing some more small ball lineups too, I guess, if it does work out well. That doesn't mean Danilo is going to be playing the five. That'd be Giannis playing the five, and then maybe Danilo at four if he's hot and he's doing okay on defense, holding his own. If he could keep up with the offense, and he's played with Doc before, I'm pretty sure as well. So maybe there's some connection there. He knows his offense. Maybe it'll fit seamlessly, but we can definitely slide into the negatives. I obviously said I didn't want him when we first talked about it and brought him up on the podcast. I think that broke as we were recording that day. Um, but it made a lot of sense just because of the options. There weren't a ton of guys out there, and he was definitely seemed like a guy that we would have to go after. The other part of that too was I kind of wanted to stay under that second apron. And once John Horst said we're going to be picking up somebody for sure, then that kind of came out the window, and I'm like, well, of the options, I guess Danilo would sort of make sense, and I could see him being somewhat of a positive. It's worth taking a chance on. But the other negative, or really my last negative outside the defense, which is obvious, but what I'm scared of is him taking minutes from AJ Green as someone who we definitely need an athlete, whoever that is, if it is AJ Green by the end of the year. But Andre if it's somehow Marjan out of the casket right now, if he's alive. But we need a guy, like I said, athletic, who can shoot, score, give us some sort of perimeter defense. It's not going to be great, but at least he's active and he can do something. So I just don't want to see his minutes get diminished because of we signed an old guy who's nothing like him at all, and it's just going to make us slower and a lot less athletic. So, Spencer, what were some of the negatives that you saw?
Yeah, obviously the defense is a big part of it. I, to me, this is my biggest concern is what Doc kind of hinted at today in his media availability, which is he basically said, well, having Gallo and Bobby at the 4 and 5 in a backup lineup would be you don't have to worry about much at all. I would worry about everything. I would expect the defensive ratings almost north of 200 with that lineup on the court. They would not stop a single person from getting to the hoop. I I would love for Gallo to just cut into Bobby's minutes like you were touching on. I think that's a fine way to use them. If one of them's hot, ride that guy for that game. Like, see which one of them gets going. You're going to need them to be making shots for them to be productive, either one of them. It's not going to be a case where you're getting much out of them if they're not making their shots that day. I guess I, like you said, in terms of like the available players, Gallo was one of the best available. So it's hard to be too upset at adding him in general. It does add to the floor, I guess, of the team, you could say in some ways. There is positives on offense, like I talked about. There's the ability to get hot. We've seen him make threes against the Bucks over the years where he can just kind of get on a streak and make contested shots too. He is good at making shots with somebody right in his face, which is good because he's not shaking anybody anymore and getting loose very often. I think again, I just if Doc is going to play those two together and expect them to perform well, we're going to be in a really rough spot. Even worse, our bench is going to be worse than it was, which is hard to imagine in a lot of ways. I really hope it's more of a, by committee, they're kind of the backup five slash backup four, and they rotate Brook and Giannis around those two playing their minutes so that we don't have them overlapping very much at all. Garbage time, whatever. Like at some point, it's fine if they share the floor, but they should not be playing real minutes together at any point. And I'll tell you what, if that works, we might win the championship because that lineup should not work. There's no reason it should work ever. Um, yeah, I, there's plenty of negatives here. Like I said, I'm not upset by the signing at all. Like it makes sense. There's plenty of reason to do it. I just worry about that possibility more than anything. So, anything else you want to touch on, or were you hoping for maybe something else in the buyout market, like a different maybe position, somebody else who could help in a different way?
Well, we were talking about how people who don't know once we're in the apron, our options are already super limited. So it's not like you just got everybody who was waived or released. We couldn't go get Kyle Lowry or whoever else was up there. Or PJ never actually happened. He wanted to stay with the Clippers for some reason. But
Money.
yeah, well, yeah. But and he wouldn't have much of a role here anyways. But anyways, the one name that did pop up afterwards that would have fit perfectly was DeLone Wright of the Wizards, who got picked up by the Heat. I'm sure that we had some type of contact, even though technically we signed Gallo, I think, the day before, and then Wright came out the day after. Then he signed with the Heat pretty much immediately. So there was probably conversations behind the scenes. He, we just got Pat Bev. Maybe he felt like we had too many cooks in the kitchen at guard. I could see that happening too. I think he would have fit a lot better. A guy who at least you can. It's a coin flip if he's going to work or not, but at least you have a chance to have some perimeter defense, a guy that maybe you could acquire and it could make some sense with our group. But yeah, I mean, that was the one guy that I think at least changes the outlook of a Gallo. Like it's completely different. And also, I'm willing to take a chance on it. But I know that was a guy you actually wanted to trade for if there was the opportunity. And I'm sure you've got a lot more to say about him than I do. And I wasn't super high in him, but in a buyout situation, absolutely, I would have took a chance on him. So.
Yeah, I think for me, Wright is one of the better kind of one-on-one defenders available, and the Bucks did pick up somebody who's good at that at the deadline with Pat Bev. I think if the deadline had gone differently and say instead of a Beverly trade, they had picked up a big or they had picked up a wing, you might have seen Wright as an option for the Bucks, and maybe he would have been interested. Who knows? He might have wanted to just he might have said, "Hey, if you're going to buy me out, I'm going to the Heat, or I'm not. I want to stay on the Wizards." Like you never know what's going on in some of these situations. It made plenty of sense for the Heat, unfortunately, which always happens. They obviously traded Lowry as part of the Terry Rozier trade. Now they get kind of that defensive part of that equation back with Wright. So he'll be a good backup for them. I would have loved him on the Bucks, but I do think it probably would have been tough to make it work with Beverly as long as everyone was healthy. I mean, it's already early on. Bev hasn't even played that many minutes in a couple of the games. Like, I think it would have been tough to find minutes for all of the guards in that situation, and it might have even taken more of the AJ Green type minutes at the two away and that type of stuff too.
Hmm.
So without Beverly, absolutely, I would have loved Wright. I still think the one guy that I would have had interest in maybe more than Gallinari is Daniel House. I do like him. I've always liked him. I think he would have brought more on the defensive end than what you're getting from Gallinari by quite a bit. But I do think that since Doc took over with the defense kind of being, I don't want to say figured out, but the defense being a lot more in line with what we thought was possible, and the offense going kind of the opposite way where it hasn't been very good since Doc took over. It makes some sense to try and add offense. Maybe it is kind of redundant with Bobby, but it's probably about as good as they could have done. So there are guys that I wouldn't have minded outside of Gallinari, but I'm not going to be, like I said earlier, I'm just not going to be upset with adding him. I got no problem with it. I just worry about the possibility of Gallo and Bobby sharing the floor at all. But yeah, there was actually some other roster movement over the break here. The Bucks finally filled one of their two open two-way spots. They signed Ryan Rollins, who spent some time with the Warriors at one point, and then the Wizards. Last time I had heard of him, he was getting in trouble for stealing from Target for quite a few times, and he got cut by the Wizards shortly after that. So outside of his sticky fingers, what do we know about him? Do you like the pickup? Does he seem like a worthwhile addition on a two-way?
For people who don't know who Drew Walls is, I think Ryan Rollins has to go record one of those Target videos now, right after we signed him, and go record one of those Drew Wall videos in Target and just go shopping and no comment whatsoever. Just do that. But
They could
I know,
collab. Drew Walls is from the area.
yeah, I know he is. I'm trying to figure out where he is because he's making a good chunk of money. So, um, but yeah, I've heard of him on the Warriors, and I know some of those guys were excited about him his rookie year. He actually didn't put up great stats or anything, but he was obviously blocked by a lot of solid role players then. But I heard some good, like I said, wasn't watching him all the time, but he's got a nice smooth stroke, and he was at least a somewhat, I didn't watch him in college, maybe you did, but I know that he had a decent college career too, and that's just what I really noticed was his shot. It seems pretty smooth, and um, that's really all I got. I don't know much about him, but I know he's an interesting prospect. And what the two is, for those who also don't know, we have two-way spots open. We use one of them here, so if I can get a prospect there and take a flyer on a guy who's got talent, clearly, I'll definitely take that for sure. And just got to keep him away from supermarkets and stuff like that, and hopefully he'll learn here. But yeah. So did you watch him in college at all? Are you familiar with him?
I knew who he was going into that draft. He went to Toledo, I believe. So I don't spend much time watching Toledo. If my brother Eli's listening, he probably has watched every Toledo game this year because the guy has an obsession with college basketball, random college basketball games. But what I do know of Rollins is that, like you said, I think G League wise and stuff, I think the 3-point shot looks better than what the results have been.
Hmm.
The free throw percentage has been pretty decent, so it makes me think he's at least an okay shooter. I saw some clips of him playing defense. I do think there's pretty good potential on that end. So I saw him go up and reject a big guy during the NBA Combine at the rim. He definitely has some vert to him for sure. He seems pretty strong for a guard. I think he's what, 6'4", 6'3", 6'4",
Yeah.
with pretty decent athleticism and a decent looking shot. Like, to me, that's always somebody who's worth a chance
Hmm.
the on a two-way deal. I do know, like you said, that the Warriors liked him. I think they found him pretty interesting when they had him on their He might have been a two-way for them. I don't remember if he was a two-way or if he was actually like their 15th man who just kind of went up and down. But was he part of the, how did he get to
I
Washington?
was
Was
gonna
he
say I
part
think
of
it
the
was
trade?
The Jordan Poole trade, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know I went back and looked up a little bit. I believe he was 31st on Sam Vecini, I believe is how you pronounce it. His like big board in that draft, which puts him as like a borderline late first round pick. Obviously, that's a second round pick technically, but he viewed him as somebody who was pretty interesting, somebody who had a future in the league. Now, hopefully that the shoplifting at Target, well, obviously not the best look, isn't a huge deal. You hope it's obviously not a sign of other stuff that's potentially going on, but I do think there's potential here. I think he's somebody that I want to. I used to watch herd games. I don't have time for that anymore, but I'll probably check out highlights and see how he's looking. And there are people who watch herd games who I kind of trust how to tell me how people are doing. So I'll check that out and see how he's doing. But an interesting pickup. I don't think we have to spend too much time on him, but I was wondering if they were ever going to fill those spots because it had been probably a month at least. Well, more than that. It was around Christmas, I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like,
been a
when
while.
it was probably pretty close to two. So interesting that they picked him up, especially with what happened about a month ago. Um, they must like him a decent amount as a player to be willing to take some baggage for a guy who's basically just a flyer two-way project. So in terms of roster news, we did have one other thing that came out today. Doc Rivers talking about Khris Middleton. He said he didn't practice today. He's not expected to play Friday or Sunday, but he did say he's getting better. He feels great. He just doesn't feel 100%. Clearly, if it was a playoff game, he'd clearly play, but it's too early. There's no reason to worry or panic about it. I think that quote came out probably 10 minutes too late for Buck's Twitter to heed that warning. It seemed like I was at practice myself for baseball, but I saw your text me, Gunner, about the first quote that Eric Name tweeted out about just the first part of it that he didn't practice and he's not playing Friday or Sunday. And then I came back and I was looking at Twitter and I saw the replies to that tweet. People were freaking out. And then it comes out that Doc says, well, if it was the playoffs, he'd be playing, but we're just being safe, basically. I feel comfortable with this. I'm not too worried. I do think it's a little weird. People are freaking out. Like, this was 16 days ago. He had a pretty bad ankle sprain. This feels like a pretty normal timeline to me so far. And especially knowing that he probably could play if he had to. Even before that, I just feel like I get that there's been injury issues with Khris and why people might be a little worried about it. But I feel like it's kind of ridiculous the reaction it gets whenever he does have an injury, where it's just like, yeah, he's made of glass. He's done. It's over. He can't play anymore. Like, no, that's not how it works. He had an injury. People have injuries. It's going to happen to everybody. And it was a pretty rough ankle turn. He landed on KD and it went straight sideways and the ankle hit the ground while the foot was on top of KD's foot. That's a big time sprain. And it sounds like he's probably on pace for like a 3 week. I would guess about 3 weeks because if it's 16 days right now, missing the next two, maybe he misses another one. I don't think it's too far off if he would be able to play in the playoffs. So I'm always getting defensive about Khris, obviously, but I do think the reaction he gets for this stuff is getting insane. I don't understand. He was playing so good before he got hurt too. Like he was doing exactly what you would want the third option to do on this team. And obviously, we don't know what he's going to be able to do when he comes back. Maybe it takes him some time to get going again. Like the injury sucks from that perspective, but I don't know what he's supposed to do when a guy undercuts him on a three and he rolls his ankle really badly. Like no one's avoiding that. I don't know what you want him to do in that situation. So, Gunnar, you got any thoughts on Khris, or don't let me ramble for too long here?
I was gonna say you take the bait every single time, and whenever there is Khris Middleton news, I instantly text Spencer and say, "Mr. Glass at it again," just to try to poke the bear. And Spencer takes it. He gets mad at me, but
That's not true. I sent the gift last time that said that's bait.
well, now you finally have learned a little bit. Um,
4 years later.
but in general, outside of this injury, I was already slightly nervous, but not in any way that, like you said, he's playing great. His minutes were going up. Like it's just more precautionary nervous because I know how important he is to this team now. looking at how our offense has fallen off the table when he's not even on the floor now, it just seems super clunky. So I just know that we need him. It's more of that type of nervousness, like please be okay, please be okay. But this injury specifically, like you said, it's a freak injury. It's an ankle too. It's not even the knee. It's not, and that was the concern when it first happened. I'm like, is he grabbing his knee? I mean, I know you didn't watch that game live, but when it first happened, it kind of seemed a little funky with the way he came down, and it was clearly an ankle, but I know his knee problems, whatever. So I'm just like, please don't hold your knee. It's just, I will take an ankle injury to sit out 3 weeks. I don't care. It's just, please don't re-aggravate that. So that makes me a little bit more hopeful, even though ankles are still naggy injuries. Like you said, it could be a minutes restriction, whatever. But I'm not nervous in that sense. I just want Khris to be Khris. So whatever that takes, I'll definitely take it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have to say that night when I did look at my phone after our practice, it's a good thing I read the order of your messages the way I did because one of your messages was like, I think Khris just hurt his knee, but luckily I read all the follow-up after that because or before I saw that one because I would have freaked out if I just saw that one in the middle. I wouldn't have been able to focus on practice if I saw that. I would have had problems going on. So luckily, I did not see that right away. I saw all the follow up in that it might be okay, and I even saw a tweet from somebody saying that it was more just an ankle sprain, and that made me. I was able to calm down at 11:30 at night, and I didn't want to, go too crazy on my drive home. Um, but yeah, I think everyone knows at this point how important he is to a playoff run. It's you're not making one without him. It's not you don't have the depth to cover for him missing anymore. With Pat not being what he was during the finals run, with AJ Green looking good, but he's not covering for Khris when he comes in. You're not getting that from any of the young guys, really. Gallinari is not going to be that type of guy. He's not even really a wing anymore like he used to be. It's just a small ball big at this point. You don't really have any way to cover for Khris, which is kind of part of the reason to go back to the buyout market that a Daniel House might have made a little bit more sense to me. Somebody like that, just because he's not covering for Khris either, but he's a more capable wing player than a lot of the options the Bucks do have. So, but like I said, I don't think it matters if Khris is out, if Dame is out, if Giannis is out. The Bucks are not doing what we want them to do. It's not going to happen. If all three are healthy, I'm not going to bet against them at least. I at least give him a fighter's chance. So speaking of Dame, though, I was hoping we would get this type of weekend from him. Just I think I texted you. I told a few other people too, but he had a great All-Star weekend. It couldn't have gone much better for him. He participated in the three-point contest and he won back-to-back champ. He plays in the All-Star game. He gets his first start, nails 11 threes, wins games MVP. Kind of looked like he had a little bit of like his swag back for part of it. Obviously, that's kind of projecting. We don't really know how he's feeling or anything inside. We don't know that on any of these things that we talk about. But I did say before that it felt weird, but I was really hoping he would do it. I was hoping he'd win the 3-point contest because I thought it might give him some of his confidence and like a boost to the ego. He did that, and then winning MVP couldn't hurt the ego either. I think we did see something in the All-Star game and honestly in the 3-point contest. And Reggie Miller might have made his best point I've heard in a while when he said, Dame likes to shoot these from deeper. And we talked about it a lot on here in terms of like the higher screens and giving him that room to operate beyond the 3-point line. I think he showed it over and over that he's almost more comfortable rising up from like 4 or 5 feet behind the line than stepping into it right on the line, like right behind the line from three. There are plenty of people who are like that, but he's obviously very, very good at making shots from that distance. Obviously, if he shoots from half court in a game, in a real game, I would allow it, but I don't think anyone else would in the organization. So I think that stuff obviously doesn't really matter as much, but he was pulling from the logo. He was shooting like it looked loose. Like it looked like he was just kind of like fluid instead of what he has been, where it almost looks robotic at times during some of these games. So obviously there is a huge chance that that I am reading way too much into All-Star weekend results and all of that stuff. But Gunnar, what were your thoughts? Did you feel like maybe this could be a bit of a turning point for him?
hmm I do think he needed this, and it sounds super dumb, and we're going to talk about the All-Star game in a second, but being able to perform in front of like your peers like that, and he knows it, everyone knows it, as nonchalantly as cool as they want to play, it does probably feel pretty nice to be able to drain some shots in front of all the stars in the league. And he even said himself after the game, like, I'm starting, so why did I not go for the MVP? Like he knew, he was like, all right, well, it doesn't really seem like I'm trying. Like he shot a half court shot, and we always say like literally half court shot. He legitimately shot the ball from half court. Like I've never, Steph can't even shoot. Like he kind of a pusher shot type of thing, but I mean he's gonna make it still. But Dame legitimately shoots like he's shooting a pull up three from half court. It is literally insane. Um, and like you said, a couple steps more in maybe in transition, I will not be mad at him shooting that shot in a game because he can actually make it. Um, and to that point, like you were saying, if he's doing those types of shots, that's what I talk about, like Dame shots. Like this is like the swag we need back is Dame shots. I don't care if he misses them. Yeah, I don't want you taking five of them and you just completely airball them or something, but like do some things that make you feel comfortable, and that makes him feel comfortable is shooting those shots and getting into the rhythm that way. Um, Giannis said after that game too is like he didn't mean it like this. I think people took it very literally, but he said, "Dame, this is your team. Like at the end of the games, it's going to be your ball." And some people took it as like Giannis is not taking responsibility for the team, but it's because he's a scorer and he's a shooter, so it's going to make more sense. We've been asking for this type of guy for a while. We've gotten it with Khris. That's why Khris closes a lot of those games. So this is how Dame kind of gets into his rhythm. Him being able to be like the leader in that sense of scoring, like creating your own shot, doing what you got to do to score. This was a nice segue into doing that in front of all those peers and everything. And the last bit of note here, it did feel nice to take that from Tyrese Halliburton in his home crowd. I don't think anyone will ever get booed again when they get an MVP trophy. So it felt pretty nice, and hopefully we don't. Oh, actually, I'll take playing them in the playoffs at this point. Who cares? But um, that's definitely going to add some juice to that Pacers Bucks rivalry, if you want to call it that.
I do have to say on the Halliburton note, him and Giannis seemed real buddy buddy at the game, which just felt
Hmm.
weird. It was not what I was expecting at all. I feel like Giannis just doesn't care about what happened at all, and I think
He had just
Hallie just
hopped on the Redick podcast earlier in the week and was
yeah.
talking about the ball gate too, and saying how Giannis was screaming in his face, and Giannis is just acting like a child around him when he sees him in
Yep.
person.
You calling him Mr. NBA Fitz and telling him, "Hey, I'll be your Obi Toppin tonight." He was just like he seemed really friendly with Tyrese. There was even a point where Halliburton asked him like, "Who's the assist leader for the Bucks all time?" And Giannis was like, "It's me." He's like, "I got it." He's like, "I got points, assists, rebounds, blocks, steals." He's just rattling them all off, and um, I guess it does point to the fact that Tyrese, as he has said many times, didn't care about the Bucks growing up, but I guess growing up is kind of he was probably in college when Giannis would have been even doing any of this stuff or starting to set records, so that doesn't really matter. But we like to take that shot anytime we can. Um, but along the lines of Dame too, there was one kind of quote which was after the All-Star game, came from a guy who has a lot of experience. He was obviously kind of the flipped version of the players in this situation, but Shaq, who obviously has kind of been in the spot with Kobe in the past, gave Dame some advice. And I thought it was one of the best things Shaq could have possibly said in that moment to Dame. And this is kind of paraphrasing. I just shortened it up a little bit, but he said, meaning Shaq, have been in this position before, obviously referring to that Kobe pairing that I was talking about. Stop being so nice. You, Giannis, and Doc are going to be blamed if this doesn't work. Take the team by the neck and assert yourself. You guys are too good to be 3-7 with Doc. And you could tell that Dame was kind of shocked in at first that somebody was saying that to him like in that moment. But you could also tell that he was really taking it in and acknowledging that like, yeah, I think we've kind of been discovering that. Like you could tell he was like, yeah, I think we kind of were thinking that on our own in some ways, but I think having somebody of that stature saying that to him can only help. I don't think there's any way it's going to hurt anything. And we've talked about it. That's what needs to happen. Giannis and Dame need to show that this is a pairing that is going to take over games together. It's not just like, here, let's pass the ball back and forth. You take these possessions, you take these. Like, no, you got to do it together and you got to still involve the rest of the team. But they do need to stop being so nice. Like that is a legitimate thing. They both are trying to be too perfect and they're both trying to make everybody happy. And in a lot of ways, you can't do that. You're not going to make everyone happy. Bobby doesn't need to take as many shots as he is. Tell him not to. We've had guys in the past. I'm hoping Pat Bev can be a guy who does that too. Like PJ probably was in Bobby's ear at times, even though PJ was not exactly an offensive guy or anything. I don't think you have to be. You don't have to be the star. You have to be the guy who's willing to give the hard truth. And it'd be best if it comes from Giannis and Dame. But in general, the team needs to be able to have those conversations with each other, I think. And hopefully we start seeing it from those two more than anything else. And they stop deferring to other people. And that doesn't mean you make the wrong or you don't make the right pass when a guy's open or you don't make the extra pass when a guy's open. But sometimes it does mean you don't make the extra pass. Like there were a few games towards the end of the first half where Dame was just straight up passing up an open shot to try and get someone else an open shot. And if that's Malik Beasley, I can hear the argument for it. If that's Brooke or Bobby or Jay Crowder or most of those guys, that's got to be Dame shooting the ball. Just because they're more open does not make it a better shot. Like you got to be the aggressor there. You got to be the one taking that shot. And I feel like that's what Shaq was kind of hinting at. Like, be you. Be the guy who takes those shots. If you have it, shoot it. Don't worry about what anyone else thinks. Don't worry about trying to please Giannis. Giannis can do the same thing. Don't worry about trying to make Dame's life perfect. Like, be yourselves, but work together to do it. So, Gunnar, you got any extra thoughts on that? I know I probably took some of those.
The first one is the only thing I've ever cared about so far, going from Drew to Dame, is not necessarily personality wise, but it's so hard to read Damian Lillard's like facial reactions or how he's actually taking the information or when he's talking about something, how much he actually cares about it. We know because I mean you definitely know you've been following him a lot longer than I have, more intensely, but in Pacer fan or not Pacer fans, Trailblazer fans have been warning us about not warning us. He's a great guy. He won teammate of the year one year. He's known to be a great guy, but like, hey, this is kind of who he is. He's chill. Like he's always chill, no matter what the situation is. If he hits a game-winning shot, he's chill. If he misses a game-winning shot, he's chill. So when Shaq gave him the information, I was like, is he kind of blowing him off or is he listening? Or but I'm like, no, I think he actually is like embracing it. He's just like getting like, oh yeah, I know I'm ready to go. Like that's how it's gonna go in the second half. So I was excited about that. This might make some people mad, but comparing Giannis and Dame to Shaq and Kobe is probably the best comparison in like the modern era, like of two guys, a shooter, a scorer versus a guy who's primarily in the paint, still wants the ball, still has to eat, but in an entirely different way. I think that actually getting that advice from Shaq himself, we talked about it when that trade first happened. I think Shaq had a couple quotes about us, and I told you like actually, Shaq's probably the best guy to give us advice for those two guys because he understands what it's like to work with somebody like that, being in Giannis's shoes. Now, Dame, obviously, Kobe's not here. RIP, we love you, Kobe. But Dame's going to have to figure that part out on himself. But Shaq knows everything about that situation, period. So to learn from that guy, he's awesome. One of my favorite players ever. And yeah, I think saying that they were too nice is definitely the best way to put that because they got to be a little bit more mean.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. So I guess one of the bigger talks around, especially on social media over the weekend, was the high score in the All-Star game. It seemed like Adam Silver was not thrilled at the end of it, talking about the 211 points that he scored. And obviously Saturday night was also a bit of a letdown in at least the dunk contest. Do you think that they do need to make changes, that this needs to be fixed, and how might you attack fixing it?
The skills challenge as currently constructed is horrendous. And I would just go back to, I heard Zach Lowe's podcast, at least this within the last week, and he was talking about how maybe just do like one round of something, like one skills round, but how it used to be when like Chris Paul and Darren Williams were in it. And I told you about this, but like that was fun for me to watch as a kid. I would set it up in my basement and watch along Saturday night. That was one of my favorite, if not my favorite, thing outside of shooting threes. That's also a favorite of mine. But that setup worked a lot, and it seemed like a lot of stars wanted to play in that too. And at least when we were kids, they were in. You can't really get embarrassed in that setting. I think that's what a lot of guys are seem to be scared of, is trying too hard and then looking stupid, which is just stupid. But you're at the All-Star game or All-Star weekend. It's a privilege to be there. So you're already considered one of the best people there. But um, yeah, I think the skills challenge, that's what I would change with that. Dunk contest, I don't know how you change it necessarily. Outside of stop favoring if there is a star in there, don't favor him just because he showed up. Not he's not jumping over a 5'3" guy in a chair. And it's I don't know that dunk, was it D Brown? Who was that guy in the Celtics who he's trying to imitate?
I believe so, yes.
He dunks it and then pays homage after the dunk and puts his head in his elbow.
He
That's not how
basically
the dunk.
dabbed.
And that got like what, like a 48 or something horrible. I
Yeah,
don't even know what that got.
yeah.
And he's in the finals. So I don't know what it is. I saw a clip of like college dunk contests, and I don't know if you've seen those, but they're actually like kind of hype. And I don't know if it's just like the smaller setting or I don't know what it is because the dunks are obviously nicer and cooler, but it's not that much different as far as like quality of dunks. It's just they make the environment a lot cooler. So I don't know if they got to go to like a smaller setting of like just the stars watching and making it more cool. I don't know what it is, but um that's what I would change, I guess, with the dunk contest is somehow making it cool and taking notes from because they do it like in a smaller gym, I think, for
Yeah,
college.
they do. They
Yeah.
do. I think fans are there, but it's obviously it's the college version of it. There's just not as much
Hmm.
hype around it at all. But a lot of those guys even come from small schools and stuff over the years when I've
Yeah.
watched it. It's kind of like what the NBA has had, where you've got basically two G leaguers in this year's dunk contest, and then I don't know if I'm calling Jaylen Brown a star, but he was in it. He was, they were
All
trying to
star.
push they were trying to push him as a star, but a good player for sure. Um, no, it was ridiculous that he made the finals. Jacob Toppin had a much, much better first round than Jaylen Brown did, but whatever. I don't really care that much about it. I do agree on the skills challenge. They either got to go to something else or they need to go back to the original skills challenge and maybe like beef it up a little bit. But like you said, the biggest thing on all of these is that people have to be willing to try. I mean, Scotty Barnes dribbling the ball off his left foot when he was going through the thing because he just was straight up. He clearly was not trying. He was just like walking through it.
Anthony Edwards shooting left-handed for the whole thing when he actually had a chance to win.
Yeah, you could tell. So this is part of the reason I love Wemby. Wemby was not happy that they didn't do well. Like he was trying, you could tell he was like trying to laugh a little bit with them.
Hmm.
He wanted to win. And I think he even talked about it after about like I was trying to win. Like I wanted to do well in this. And it seemed like everyone else was kind of just screwing around. But I think that's the type of like Giannis is willing to just go out there and embarrass himself. He has. He's done it. He's done it. Going back to the dunk contest the first time, not the best showing in the world. The skills challenge, I don't think he made any of the shots that he took in that. He doesn't care though. He's there. He knows it's for fun and he tries. And as much as he might get clowned, like it's much better entertainment for the fans to have people who are out there giving effort and who try. And that's part of the reason the G Leaguers have done so well in the dunk contest. Those guys are legitimately like they want to win that thing. They're trying to make a name. The other reason is that Mac McClung has like a 50-inch vertical and it's absolutely insane. But like they made this huge deal out of all-star Jaylen Brown being in the dunk contest and they're pushing this on you and it's not a thing. Like I want it to be normal for players like that to do these things. And you talked about LeBron, like maybe you didn't. Maybe I just thought you did. But LeBron did the skills competition back in the day when he was probably like a third or fourth year player.
Hmm.
But he's never done any of the other stuff because he is afraid of getting clowned for it. He absolutely is. And he can say what he wants, but that's what it is. But the skills competition used to be the best point guards in the NBA going at it and trying to win. And it was super entertaining. The other thing I think they need to bring back, do you remember the shooting stars thing they used to do before? When they
Yeah,
would
with
have,
like the legends and
yeah,
WNBA players.
yeah. I loved that competition. That was
Hmm.
fun. Like that, and it didn't take that long. It was like a 30-minute thing, finishing with
Hmm.
half court shots. But I loved watching that. It was cool to watch like former players who are older people like doing their thing still. That was fun. It was good that I mean, honestly, I didn't know some of the WNBA players, especially as a kid. It was cool to see like, hey, they're competing with everybody out here. It's
Hmm.
we saw it this weekend too with Sabrina. I'm not going to pretend I can pronounce her last name, but
Ionescu or something like that.
yeah, but she was shooting that thing. Like she would have
Hmm.
advanced in the real 3-point competition. Unfortunately, she just had to face Steph, who is
Kenny Smith was
otherworldly.
not impressed with her performance, but it
No,
was
Kenny Smith was trying to lose his job this whole weekend. I, honestly, along the lines of what needs to be fixed, the commentating needs to be fixed.
yeah.
It it's it's embarrassing. They're downplaying everything. Look, what's the point of that? Kenny either overhypes a Jaylen Brown dunk during the thing and tries to make that a big deal, or he just downplays everything else that happens the entire night. And obviously, like we said, there was reason to downplay the skills challenge because that was a mess. It wasn't fun. Nobody was trying. Like, you can rip on that because there was no effort. That should get ripped on. But him like downplaying the 3-point contest as not the headliner the entire time, that was absolutely the headliner. Nobody enjoyed the dunk contest more than they enjoyed the 3-point contest this weekend. And that can't really be the case. It used to be 100% the opposite.
Hmm.
Like there were days when Jason Capono was winning the 3-point contest and nobody cared about that. But you were seeing Dwight Howard as Superman in his prime doing dunk contests. Blake Griffin in his prime doing dunk contests. Like those guys were doing it. We don't see, we saw Levine, who was a good player when he was doing it and all this stuff, but we don't see those types of players, even the ones who are extremely good dunkers, joining these things anymore. And I will say, I complimented Giannis. Dame has taken part in every single All-Star Weekend event over the course of his career at some point. He was in the dunk contest. He was in the skills challenge. He's obviously won 2 3-point contests. I think those players should be applauded for doing that, and it should become the norm. It shouldn't be abnormal for good players to be taking part in these things that are supposed to showcase the best skills in the entire league. Those are going to normally be your best players. So that is, I think that's really the only way Saturday night gets fixed. I will say, I know they tried horse one year.
I was going to bring that up.
It didn't go
KD, I
super
remember
well.
that. Yeah.
I feel like it would go a lot better now because players are much, much better shooters than even they were a decade ago when
Hmm.
they tried it. Like, I would watch Dame shoot from the other free throw line and try and make that as part of a horse game, and I would be extremely entertained. Like, I could do that.
Think of that half court shot to like win a horse game. That would be pretty hype.
Yeah, like people could get into that. And there are people, there are people who can shoot shots behind their back and do stuff like that, especially NBA players. Like, I think that would be extremely fun to watch. It, I think it's at least worth trying stuff like that. Again, the shooting stars thing, the horse thing, try those things out and see if it brings in at least more entertainment. It could even be a rotating thing where you try and keep it fresh every year by doing a new event, doing something new, but just doing the skills challenge where no one tries, a 3-point contest where it actually is pretty, it's impressive how well people shoot at this point. So that one's pretty entertaining in general. And then a dunk contest where one guy is absolutely killing it, and then the other three are kind of just out there doing some decent dunks and somehow almost getting 50s for them. So I think it comes down to more just the stars being willing to do stuff and the NBA needing to try something else just to keep things fresh.
Hmm.
With the skills challenge, though, I will say they were trying to do that with this 3-man, 3-team thing. That sucks. And that was an awful idea from the start. It was never going to work. They need to go back to just one-on-one stuff for that. But at
Hmm.
least I'll give them credit because they tried something else. In terms of the All-Star game, I don't know how you fix it. I really don't. They tried it with the Elam ending, and it worked for that first year with the Kobe thing going on. And obviously, I think just the timing of it with Kobe played a big part in that. Like players were trying to pay tribute to him. And that was genuinely the most fun I've ever had watching an All-Star game. It wasn't even close. But since then, there's been an okay ending. I think the year after they tried pretty hard for that, just for that ending.
Hmm.
The charity thing seemed like a good idea. At least it helped a little bit. But as soon as the team got down by like 10, they were like, well, we're not going to win this quarter. We'll just try and win the next quarter. So it, I don't know how you fix it. I don't know that it ever will be fixed. I still say the MLB All-Star game is the only one that is ever going to be truly the game that you're used to watching when you turn it on. Obviously, the Pro Bowl's not. They play freaking flag football now, but the All-Star game to me is still it's entertaining. Like you don't get to watch Dame shoot from half court at the beginning of a possession in a normal game, in a game that they're just absolutely trying to win. Like you don't get to see those things. And I do think sometimes it's important to remember that these aren't for us. necessarily for the older people at this point. It's a lot of it's for kids and for players to just have fun playing with players they never play with. So, as much as it would be really cool to see them super competitive, I do think the best of both worlds is kind of that 3/4 of or super like alley oops, half court shots, all that stuff. And then I loved that Elam ending where they try really hard. Like that's the best combo for me. I'm hoping they can find a way to make that more feasible. But Gunnar, you didn't talk about the All-Star game at all. Do you have any other ideas or anything that would make sense for that?
Yeah, I think MLB works like you mentioned because people talk about like, oh, let's replace it with like a one-on-one matchup. I think MLB you get one-on-one matchups,
Yep.
you get Shohei versus Trout, you name it, pitcher versus hitter. Like you can talk about that for a while, like who he got the best of him or whatever, and guys don't take it that seriously. Like Shohei struck out Trout in the World Baseball Classic. It's like a respect thing. Like he struck him out. Who cares? Like it was cool. Like that whole at bat was like awesome.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I would replace the game with like a one-on-one matchup thing, and there's no way guys would do that either. They're not going to go one-on-one for like a Saturday night challenge either. But the actual game, they're talking about paying the players. I guess you could get like a bonus, but if you have to pay guys to try hard, I think that's kind of stupid too. Um, they're talking about maybe how the MLB is it still there's not like the home,
The home court
yeah,
thing
yeah.
for the finals.
I know
They
they
don't
used
do
to
it
do
for
that.
baseball anymore, no.
Yeah, but I know that's a thing too. But I like let's say the Bucks are out of it one year. Why would we want to help the Celtics? As bad as that sounds, why would I want to help the Celtics win a championship? I don't want to do that. So, or at least, especially if I'm like a competitor like Giannis, like okay, why would I? He probably is always going to try, so that's a bad example. But um, just yeah, I can see guys thinking like that too, and like us and the Pacers. Like, why would we help the Pacers out or the Pacers help us out? Doesn't make a lot of sense there. So. I thought maybe like a shorter game makes sense, like less chance for someone to get hurt, and they can just kind of maybe two halves of like 12 minutes, but then the league probably won't like that either because they're probably getting money in like ads and stuff. There's a reason why they want to have the game be that long. So I don't know how you fix the game itself. You just got to get guys to try harder, unfortunately. So, um, Spencer, if you got nothing else in the game itself, we can jump right into the JJ Redick drama where he called out Doc Rivers for excuse making, blaming his players, never taking accountability. We saw Patrick Beverly, our very own, clap back at him. We got to get used to him running his mouth. Um, to me, he was on the wrong side of that, but we can get into that in a second. Um, I guess we can get into that part right now. Spencer, do you think? Well, we'll start with JJ Redick first, I guess. His original comments, we'll stick with that, and then we'll go to Pat Bev. Do you think JJ was in his rights to? Because we talked about Doc's shortcomings over the years. Does he have a point with what he said? Um, yeah, I guess that's it, really. Does he have a point with what he said at all, really, in that statement?
Yes, he does. I I think that that is one of the things that worried me about Doc from the beginning when we were potentially going to hire him. He has always felt like a pretty big excuse maker. Some of the excuses are reasonable excuses, don't get me wrong. Losing Chris Paul in that series when they were up and then not being able to win it, like I get it. That's a pretty big deal. That was prime Chris Paul. It completely changed the team. Makes sense. Ben Simmons not taking the free dunk and kind of flipping the script and then not wanting to shoot anything after that. It's a real excuse. That's a real thing that happened. I just think there's a level of taking of keeping players accountable without making it sound like everything's their fault and that I couldn't have done anything about it. And I do think he doesn't do the best job of walking that line over the course of his career. Now, in terms of Redick calling him out, I do think it's almost in a way kind of, why can't I think of the word here? Two-faced is the best I'm going to come up with right now, but
Yeah.
where he's basically not taking any of the blame for what happened on his side and saying, well, Doc is the reason everything went wrong. Like, okay, well, how about both of you guys were screwing up? JJ, you didn't play very well in the playoffs. Doc, you didn't coach very well in the playoffs. Now you're both just Doc hasn't said anything. I shouldn't say that. But at the time, he does. He does make excuses. So I think there's a level of like everybody just kind of needs to look in the mirror in that situation in terms of JJ does too. And I think that that is a legitimate criticism of Doc, and it has been for a pretty long time. I'll let you handle this Pat Bev part of it here, but I love JJ's like Old Man and the Three podcast, and especially when he's got the Dunker Spot guys on or Legler, like those guys. That's a really informative basketball podcast when those guys are on. When JJ gets into first take mode and gets into that type of mode, he starts getting even when he's just around like Richard Jefferson, who I think they're mostly just they like to mess around with each other. But even when he's just even doing some of the TV broadcasts, he gets into this mode where it's not the same guy. And I know he actually talked about it today or yesterday or whenever it was about how, well, when I put out a YouTube video showing Zion Williams as the pick and roll ball handler or whatever it was, I get 51,000 views. But when I talk about Doc for 10 seconds, it gets millions of headlines and views. He's like, so what do basketball fans really want? Listen, real basketball fans do want that type of content that he's talking about with Zion and that type of actual legitimate basketball stuff. But pop culture is always going to overrule the people who want real basketball, baseball, football, anything. Headline grabbing stuff is always going to overrule it. That's just how the world works. So when you gave people a chance for this headline, you're going to get people who don't even care about basketball that much who are going to want to weigh in on that situation because it's beef. People love beef. People love people arguing with each other. That's why First Take has lasted as long as it has as a show. There's no actual content there. Speaking of Ryan Hollins, when we mixed that one up earlier, like you're not getting any type of real basketball input on those shows. JJ does bring it sometimes, but you can tell it's a totally different level or a totally different person when he's on that show. So I will, before I throw it to you for Pat Bev here, I will say I think that Pat Bev definitely feels like he owes a lot of his career to Doc and the opportunity and opportunities that he's given him.
It's like the opposite, basically.
Right. So I get why he would feel like he should stand up for him. In a lot of cases with Pat Bev over his career, he probably didn't do it exactly the correct way, the right way to go at it. And I don't think that he came with all of his facts in a row when he came to do it. But I do think that I almost think in terms of from a Bucks point of view, I think it's a good thing to see a player on the Bucks standing up for the coach right away. I don't think that hurts anything in the locker room. So I'll say that's my one take on the Pat Bev part of it, but I know you have more thoughts. So why don't you take it from here?
I think, and I'll quickly touch on the JJ part because you basically stole all my points for that, which is good because we agree on that. He talked about, I think the quote that rubs JJ the wrong way, and I remember it because like you said, we listened to JJ's podcast, and I remember him talking about a quote that Doc had one time of this had to be a couple of years ago or maybe last year, I don't know, but he had a quote after the Clippers lost and said, "Oh, we had no chance." To hear your coach kind of say we literally had zero chance to win a series, that definitely sucks.
Yeah.
I talk about like when we didn't have Khris in that Celtics series, we talked about 100 times. Like I feel like we have a chance still, even though we probably don't. It's a star getting out, but I still feel like we have a chance, and you got enough always. But I think as a player, that's what kind of always has rubbed him the wrong way. Doc also in Pat Bev and Austin Rivers, we can tie that in too. He had some comments as well, his son. He talks about how Doc did technically pay the consequences though for those shortcomings in those seasons. He got fired for doing those things.
Right.
I think you mentioned this pretty much, but Doc, as we've already known, he's been here for 10 games. He's going to run his mouth, which is a great trait to have as a coach, but also we're having a PR nightmare this week because he can't seem to stop making quotes out of nothing when no one's asking him questions about it. He just says the truth, or the truth, whatever. He's just saying facts that he thinks are facts, but he's doing it in his own way when unprovoked. So I guess that's my thing. And with Pat Bev, I think he was wrong to say that for sure. That was kind of my point too, though, is Pat is like the complete opposite player as JJ, and JJ was talented since college. He was going to be a good player no matter what. So Pat Bev was wrong in that sense of JJ was going to be a start. We literally just had JJ in the Bucks. He was probably his worst stretch ever in any
It
NBA
was.
team he had. But we knew he was good and he was talented, and we knew he was going to get paid. Hence why he didn't stay with the Bucks because we didn't want to pay him. But he's a good player no matter what. Pat Bev, on the other hand, maybe didn't always have this great talent, which I think he actually was a decent recruit at the time or something. But
You ever seen his high school stats? That dude has maybe the most impressive high school
yeah,
line I've ever seen.
I think he views himself though as like an underdog because he went to like China and all that. Or I
Oh
think
yeah,
he even said he went to Greece in a recent episode, which I didn't
he did.
know. Yeah, so and that's how he talks about his relationship with Giannis. Um, but he just it seems like the complete different type of player in that sense. Like you said, he probably feels tethered to Doc in that way. Like this guy let me be me. That's what I talked about in the other episode. It kind of scares me when he lets Pat be Bev, but or Pat be Pat. Um, but in a way that'll help us in the long run. But I think Austin, his son, hit it more home. He basically said what Pat Bev was trying to say, but said it a lot more calmly, um, and made his thoughts a lot more known. I'm just waiting for JJ to hit him back with like, well, he did make your career though, Austin, because you were not doing great. Um, and Austin actually had some good seasons in the Clippers too, so he in top 10 pick, so whatever. But um, that's just how JJ could probably close that line of defense for Austin. So this just sucks. I think we could probably talk about this in general. Is we thought this week was going to be a nice down week for the Bucks, and we got a nice Saturday night with Dame. We got a nice Sunday night with Dame, and it's like, well, we can just sail this week and start playing again. And here we go Friday, and we can just wipe our hands clean and let's get ready for the second half of the year. And these guys have just had some not horrible quotes, just things that you don't need to be talking about right now. I talked about Doc. There was a clip of Dame circulating, which is a whole other topic, but somebody chopped up a clip of him nicely. We don't know the whole context of the clip, but he basically was asked his starting five and he didn't include Giannis. Who knows what the actual question was to begin with, whatever. He's playing with Giannis right now, and it was probably like, who's your dream lineup? But just things where it's like, this is a bait question, Dame. Why do we just throw Giannis in there and who cares? Or at least say something nice about Giannis. But and I don't think Dame really reads into any of that type of stuff. But it was just not a fun week as far as the PR team for the Bucks had to be sweating all week.
Yeah, I think really with Doc, and you touched on it, there's going from Bud, who did not want to tell the media a single thing that he was not required to tell them. Then Griffin, who was pretty similar, he didn't want to give much information. Doc, they could ask him his social security number and he'd just probably throw it out there on live air. Like he seems to not want to hold anything back, which you definitely appreciate the inside look at some of this stuff, but there's a level of like hold back some of the information or some of your opinion or some of what you're thinking in terms of, man, I wouldn't wish this on anybody, or this is harder than I thought it was going to be. Like, yeah, Doc, we get it. It probably is harder than you thought it was going to be. Do you understand that that's going to sound terrible in the media when you say that? And in terms of that Dame video, that one to me was easily the most overblown, especially by Bucks fans, I would say. The guy, maybe he didn't include Giannis. Maybe he was allowed to use it, Giannis as one of his options. That TikTok, whatever it was, whoever the guy was, I think he was like a middle school reporter that was doing that interview. I'm not kidding. I'm pretty sure he was like an
Yeah,
eighth
he might
grader.
have been.
And it was chopped up in the middle of Dame giving names, which to me is a little shady. Makes me wonder if he was like, can I name teammates? And then, no, it's more of a dream lineup of guys you haven't played with or whatever. And then all of a sudden he makes it look like, yeah, he said his dream lineup doesn't include. It's like knowing that it would get him a ton of attention, which good for the eighth grader if he did figure that out and played that all out too. I mean, kudos to him. But that one to me was the most overblown. I don't really care. That Giannis at one point, multiple times, Dame has said Giannis is the guy he wants to play with out of every player in the NBA. So him suddenly not including him in his dream lineup, I don't care about that. I also think the Giannis I don't watch basketball thing got super overblown,
Hmm.
as if the guy doesn't watch film. He talks about watching film constantly. That just means he doesn't go home after playing basketball and doing basketball stuff the entire night and turn on TNT to watch the Nuggets play the Kings. That's what he's saying. Like, I don't watch these random games afterwards, and that's fine. You don't have to do that. And honestly, in a lot of ways, it's probably healthier for him not to do that. Spend time with family while he's got that opportunity, do whatever. That one I didn't care about either. The Doc quotes are where some of them were like, okay, I get it, but shut up. You don't need to say all
Didn't
this stuff.
I'm just thinking of this right now. Didn't you pick Spencer Hawes as your random buck one of these weeks?
I did at one point, yeah.
because he quote tweeted. I just remember this right now as we're talking. He quote tweeted at Bev's tweet, or maybe it was JJ's, and he put like a check mark or something, or he had like a quote of saying like you didn't make JJ's career or whatever. Like he jumped in on the conversation, so I thought that was funny that he also
Right.
jumped in. We had a couple guys jump in as well.
I did see Marcin Gortat, who I actually enjoyed as a player, jumped in and very quickly took JJ's side. So, not my favorite thing seeing a bunch of Doc's favorite players come out and not like him, but we've seen that already for a while. So, I'm going to have to get used to it. Hopefully, he proves everybody wrong. But no, those were the ones really that just were a little annoying. I think of most of it was overblown, and most of it would not
Hmm.
have been as big a story if it wasn't for the break right now, if there were games going on and people had other stuff to focus on. But instead they go on this media run, and of course they give a few a few quotes that are going to get you plenty of attention when nothing else is there to talk about. So I guess we should talk about some of the quickly. I'll touch on a couple of the positive ones that they had, such as Dame kind of taking the Thanasis criticism and turning it around and just talking about how good of a teammate is, how much he appreciates him, and how hard he works and all that stuff. We've talked about it on here before, but everyone who plays with Thanasis loves him. Like we can make that argument, whatever you want to say. We'll touch on actually this will lead us right into the documentary. It is so clear how important he is to Giannis, too. Like there's just no reason to care about him being the 15th man on this team, making league minimum and caring as much as anybody on the roster at all times. There's no negative to that. There isn't. He works super hard in practice. I can't imagine like if he's on scout team and he's defending people, I can't imagine he's making them worse by playing as hard as he does and being as athletic as he is and stuff. Like I just don't see downside in many
This is
ways
what
to
I was
him.
saying about Thon Maker all these years, Spencer. His elbows did not hurt anybody.
Guess who demanded a trade? One of the worst players ever to demand a
He
trade.
made Giannis who he is.
Killian Hayes might have beat out Thon Maker as the worst player ever to demand a trade, but that is it. That is the only one. But no, I think why don't we take that right into the documentary? So I probably should have the name off the top of my head, but I forgot what it's
It
called.
was just Giannis.
Was it? I thought it
Yep.
was like a three-word thing. But
It was
anything.
Giannis, and then there was something like Giannis semicolon, and then it was something of I don't know,
Okay.
but it was
Yeah.
called Giannis.
Okay. But it's on Amazon. It came out on Monday. It was, when people talk about something happening and they say screaming, crying, throwing up. Well, I did the last two in a span of 24 hours after watching that documentary. So I was crying during it and then I was throwing up the next day. So I almost hit the trifecta. But I will say it, as much as I enjoyed like the Disney movie that they made last year or whenever that was, probably close to 2 years ago now, maybe we all knew that wasn't exactly how everything went. It's a Disney movie. Like it's gonna be more for children, more for younger people, just to get an idea of how Giannis lived. Hearing it from the perspective of the family was so much more, there was so much more detail, so much more we learned. As much as I know almost everything about Giannis, I still learned a bunch of stuff from this documentary. And I think it's just in a lot of ways, it was nice to see a pro athlete who was super open about emotions, super open about how important family is to him, how important the mental side of things. I mean, he talked about how he almost quit in the middle of the championship season. He almost quit basketball in the middle of the championship season. He almost quit basketball in the middle of his rookie season. He talked about all that stuff and how seeing a therapist and all this stuff helped him so much. I think that side of him, it makes me question how anybody has problems with him. I just don't get it. I'll never get it. I've never gotten it, and I never will. But Gunnar, why don't you kind of start it off if any specific thoughts? But I don't know. He's so special. Like we are so lucky to have him. That was my main
Hmm.
takeaway here.
It was called Giannis semicolon The Marvelous Journey, so
Okay.
that was the full name. But we knew, like you mentioned, through like just him talking in that Disney movie, we kind of have known his upbringing. So that's why when I said I wanted to see this documentary is because it kind of felt like it might be more of like him throughout the years with the Bucks, which is exactly what we got, which I was super excited about. Um, just some like highlights, him like first coming in after we drafted him, and he's walking through the office and it's like a poster of Brandon Jennings and Drew Gooden. And I'm like, that is just early Bucks to
Yep.
like 2010s. That's just awesome. And the office looks like literally any office that you would see anywhere. Nothing special. Um, Speaking on facilities, they also mentioned the practice facility. I kind of knew that story, how it was not a good practice facility. I didn't know the extent of everything of how it was like a church-ish, whatever it was. Um, the conditions of the practice facility, how the water was coming through the ceilings, and having kind of Khris chime in too. We don't forget that he was there for the whole ride, pretty much. Well, it was with Giannis. He was there for the whole ride.
Yep.
Um, and just having him being able to talk about the insights too, it kind of made me feel a way too, because Khris appreciated kind of all of that stuff. As bad as it was, Khris is still here and he's committed to us as well. And it's just like kind of under the rug. It's like, oh, we got two guys like this. Um, but some of the sadder moments, I guess, was him talking about like the passing of his dad. That teared me up. Him driving, learning how to drive. It seemed like this happy, jolly moment. That was before his dad's passing. That was right when he got here, but he was sad because his family wasn't here with him. But he was also like feeling like kind of he had his own family here at the Bucks, which again, full circle. That's why he's committed to us because of all of that stuff that we put in. It was honorable work because it's not like it's work. We literally cared about him so much. Like he was like our baby. I told you that. Like he was like we literally took care of this kid. He had no family, nothing. And being a family guy that he is, and talked about how much that means to him all the time. He still talks about to this day how much it means to him. So that's why he's in Milwaukee right now, and it makes a lot of sense. I texted you this kind of as the final thing, but one, we're obviously lucky to have him, but to have all the stars line up the way that they did, it literally took this exact person, this exact type of person, this exact type of athlete to change Milwaukee and like the sports in Milwaukee and basketball specifically. Like we talked about the facilities, the Bradley Center, like I know me and you get it, but growing up as a Bucks fan, it was like not I didn't get bullied as a kid, but I would get my friends teasing me about, oh, you like the Bucks? They suck. Like no one cares about them. They have no fans. And it's like, well, I care about the Bucks. Like all I care about is watching Michael Redd and Brandon Jennings and all those guys growing up. So or Sonny Leasova, like it meant something to me. But Giannis turning that into now a name that no one laughs at anymore. The Bucks, like it's a respected name. People like poking at us still because we're a small market, but in a much different way. It feels more of like a respect thing. Like we're sick of these guys winning all the time. Like Giannis is so good, he doesn't get respect in MVP votes anymore. We just watched this documentary, and it's like this is what we're complaining about. Like Giannis not getting MVP votes. Like this kid, like he's amazing. We don't need MVP votes anymore. Like he's gotten all the accolades. It's just reminded me of like I told you, like I feel like I'm back in like 2017 rooting for Giannis, where it's like I need to protect him at all times. He's just perfect in every way, and I'm going to defend him forever. I'm just lucky to have him because, like I said, there is not a more perfect star. You literally can't create a more perfect star to be leading the Milwaukee Bucks and transforming us into this franchise that people who not new fans necessarily. Well, I guess it is new fans. I'm appreciative of the new fans. I'm so happy that people are listening and talking about the Bucks now, but I hope people can watch this and kind of understand us and like the fans who have been here the whole time, no matter what state we're in as a team, whatever, and just understand like the whole journey because that's what kind of made this whole thing beautiful for us.
Yeah. No, you couldn't have said it any better. I mean, in high school, I had a Bucks hoodie, maybe a couple. I'd wear that to school, and I mean, they were just, it was mostly like friends and stuff, but people were just like, nah, LeBron. I mean, why you even care about the Bucks? Like LeBron's running the East forever. They're never going to do anything. They're an 8 seed every year. Who cares about the Bucks? I made some outlandish predictions about Giannis when I was in high school, when I early in high school, and telling people like I think he could be the best player in the league. I think he's going to be the best player in the league. And I don't even know if I fully believed that at the time, but I was so in on him from the beginning. I remember just we saw some of the interviews in this documentary of him from like his rookie year and just thinking, weird as it sounds, like this dude is just like adorable. Like he's so easy to root for. It was like a little puppy who didn't know what was going on. And in a lot of ways, I mean that it's a weird, I guess, analogy to make, but like a little puppy who doesn't know where his family is. Like that's basically what he was for the first half of his first year. And he did a lot of he talked we know this story, but when he's running to the arena because he sent all his money to his family, all that stuff, talking about kind of staying in the gym because he didn't want to go home where no one was, all that type of stuff. So we heard a lot of the stories we had already heard, but it was really cool to hear about the Bucks part of it and see it all the way through that championship season. Seeing it all kind of pay off with that championship. And I know we talked about it a little bit over text, Gunner. It felt like the one thing they didn't really wrap up very well in the documentary was that they talked about his failures at the free throw line and stuff. And then they showed him making his free throw for 50 in the finals, but they didn't really talk about how he went 17 for 19 in that game and hit every single big free throw he could possibly hit during that game. And it felt like that would have wrapped up that whole storyline perfectly. But a couple other things, I guess, that just beyond the Bucks thing, but even starting with when they went through that office, like you talked about, for us, that seeing that and then comparing that to what they have in Fiserv and what they have in the practice facility across the street from Fiserv now, seeing him go in that office where it literally looked like a mid-range like sales company was operating in there. Like it looked
Uh,
like anybody could have been in there.
Like Dunder Mifflin.
Yes, it could have been Dunder Mifflin. Like it was probably looked even worse than that with the cubicles. It, they, I, one of the funniest in a kind of sad way for me moments was Khris talking about the Cousin Center, the practice facility, and how there was that big leak. And then I was like, wait, Khris tore his hamstring slipping at that practice facility. Like, was that leak what caused it? Like he lost an entire season because of it. And you talked about Khris a little bit, but I do want to say Drew just in that documentary, Drew had a few moments in there and stuff, and you definitely just you have to appreciate Drew. I wish he went anywhere else. Just why couldn't he have gone anywhere else? Maybe the Heat would count the same, but like anywhere but Boston or Miami, and I would just be rooting for him as hard as anybody that's not a Buck in the NBA right now. Like he's such a good person, easy to root for. I wish things would have worked out and we would have won multiple rings with him because he's got the talent to have done that with him. Obviously, just it didn't work out in the playoffs. He just wasn't good enough in the playoffs most years, but he was very fun to listen to and just hear his perspective on Giannis and how impressive a hard worker he is, how all of these things. I'm guessing he filmed this before the trade and stuff, but if he didn't, his willingness to even do this is pretty impressive if it was after the trade. I think one of the stories that actually I think the first time I would have teared up in the movie would have been when Giannis was talking about how he would trick Kostas and Alex into thinking they were playing a game to run through Greece
Hmm.
instead of like him fearing for his life and thinking that the what's it called? The political party, the Golden something, Golden Dawn,
Yeah.
Golden Dawn. Yeah, that they were possibly going to basically kill the family if they saw them at that time of night going through the city. So he made it a game and tried to protect them. And when he broke down talking about that, whew, I was a mess. Like it was, but that's the type of thing. Like he was so willing to share that. He's such a he cares so much about family that I mean that's another reason why the Thanasis thing will never bother me. Clearly, it makes Giannis happy. Who cares about anything else?
Hmm.
But I just think in the end, the entire message was again that what you said, and that's we're so lucky to have him. We cannot take him for granted. I hope Bucks fans never do. That doesn't mean he's not capable of being critiqued for stuff going wrong. And he is the best player. And a lot of times stuff falls on his shoulders. And it's okay to say, like, hey, he's not doing enough right now. He's not good enough right now. But that man has completely changed this franchise. You can absolutely make the argument he has changed the city of Milwaukee. Like we owe him so much. And like you said, it's not instead of it being almost weird to be a Bucks fan like it was back in the day, it's more weird to find someone around here who doesn't care about the Bucks. And
Hmm.
that's pretty insane to think about when you look back at the last 10 to 15 years, how much that has changed. You never could have told me this was coming at any point. So,
That
any
was the
other?
one thing too. I think they could have hit home more is one, we in a way saved Giannis in the best way possible. We saved him. He doesn't need us. He was a great human being. He had a great family regardless, but as much as we saved him, he saved us. So they could have had a part in there where we could have went to Seattle in the middle of that. And they could have hit that home a little bit better. Um, and it was an excellent documentary. I had the name pulled up who made it. It was Kristen Lapas.
Yep.
I hope I got the name right, but she, I assume it's a female. She killed this documentary. It was flawless, as even though we're nitpicking, it was flawless and gave me everything I wanted. So shout out to her because she killed it.
Yeah. 100% agree. I believe I had heard that name before, so she's definitely done some pretty big projects like this before. I think she's more of like a documentary director and stuff like that in general. So I saw some people when the trailer came out for it being like, "Oh, she's doing this, like this is going to be fantastic," which made me even more excited at the
Hmm.
time. But she did a fantastic. Everyone who worked on it was fantastic. It was cool to see even Mariah. Like we don't hear much from her. Like hearing her perspective on Giannis, that was cool too. Seeing him spend time with his kids and all that stuff. I mean, it was very cool. Um, yeah, I ending message, do not take him for granted. Be thankful that he is here. And seriously, I don't know where the Bucks would be. If they'd be here, I don't think they would be. If they never drafted Giannis. I really don't think they would be here right now. So pretty as big an impact as an athlete can have on a city, maybe ever, at least in the last like 50 years. So
Hmm.
um, if you don't have any other thoughts, we got a couple other things to wrap up here. We'll talk about this first one a little bit, and then we got a couple notes. But Eric Name reported today that Nate Mitchell will not be returning as one of the assistant coaches after this All-Star break here. So I know he was actually on the All-Star game coaching staff. I saw him listed as it, so he must have coached the All-Star game with Doc and the staff. I'm wondering if it was more like a mutual decision here because Mitchell was with Griffin in Toronto. I was looking at his
Hmm.
background a little bit. My guess is they were pretty close. Maybe Mitchell didn't feel super comfortable sticking around as a friend of Griffin, and perhaps Doc felt a little weird having somebody who was very, very close with Griffin on the staff. So it could have gone either direction, but um, he was brought in as a player development guy. I remember I was seeing that when I looked him up. That was like his role. If he's been working with Marjan, has him going super well, so maybe that played a role in it. Um, but I don't know. My guess is that it was just more of a mutual decision where they just both felt a little weird with the situation. I wouldn't have been shocked if like Patrick Mutombo had the same thing. Those are some of the guys who were like close with Griffin. Like Joe Prunty had no connection to Griffin beforehand. Like guys like that, Oppenheimer, Vin Baker, those are Bucks guys. Those are not Griffin guys.
Hmm.
But some of the guys who were just there because of Griffin, it wouldn't have shocked me to see more than this. Maybe we will find out about more than this afterwards. But Gunnar, any thoughts on that? Anything you want to add?
When he was adding all of these coaches, I definitely thought there was a chance that there was maybe too many cooks in the kitchen, sort of, because you're pushing guys down the line in the pecking
Yep.
order. And like we said, that was a Griffin guy. Um, Maybe he said he's giving his all-star check. Doc said he's giving his all-star check to Griffin, so someone had to hand the check off to him. So maybe that's why he had him coach with or at least in the practice, and just handed it off to him and then sent him his way. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm not going to read too much into this. It's not like Terry Stotts' situation earlier in the
Nope.
year. Nothing like that. So hopefully he gets another chance in the league. I'm sure he will, and that's probably going to be tied to Adrian Griffin, I bet, because they're probably buddies. So
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully he gets a chance.
I could see him going to the Sixers or something too with Nurse,
Yeah,
since that was
Nurse.
who he was under before too. So I'm sure he will get another chance. It doesn't sound like there was anything he was doing wrong necessarily. At least we haven't heard of anything like that. Um, yeah, the other two pieces of news, just a couple 10-day deals for guys who were Bucks recently, kind of recently, or at least made news about the Bucks recently. Marcus Bolden, who was one of the two ways that opened up a spot for us to be able to sign Ryan Rollins 2 months after we had let Bolden go. He had stayed with the Herd, so he had been playing with the Herd for a while. He was doing pretty well, but he signed a 10-day deal with the Hornets. Not much to add there. I hope he does well. He seemed like a good person from everything I saw. And then Justin Jackson, who I'm not as big a fan of personally at the moment, signed a 10-day deal with the T-Wolves. If you don't remember, he's the one who just made some comments about the Bucks ring and how if Kyrie and Harden don't get hurt, the Bucks don't win the ring. Nets win that series, probably sweep them. whatever. I hope he plays on Friday. I hope Giannis sends him into the ground with a dunk or something. Um, I doubt he plays on Friday, but you never know. Maybe they're signing him because they're down a bunch of players. I really don't know what the T-Wolves roster situation is at the moment, but yeah, I Gunner anything to add on either of those before we
If Justin Jackson does play, we apologize in advance. More so me, I ripped him pretty good in the last episode. So if he does have 20 points or something and we lose, I'll take that on the chin. I'm sorry, guys. That's definitely my fault.
yeah, no, we'll both have some. We'll have to pay that a little bit off. We'll pay that off a little bit if we that does end up happening. But yeah, Gunnar, why don't we finish this off with our random bucks? What do you got for this week?
So on the Giannis documentary, this is a nasty tie-in, but I somehow thought of this guy when Jason Kidd popped up in the documentary, which he got a couple kudos. Or I gave him a couple kudos because for people who don't know, I'm not a big fan of Jason Kidd at all in any sense of Jason Kidd's existence. But um, in the one thing I will give him credit for is his relationship with Giannis. And not to talk about the documentary some more, but he did have some nice tidbits in there. So shout out to Jason Kidd for that and making Giannis feel good, I guess, in those certain situations. But because I was thinking of Jason Kidd in a Kidd era, somehow Terrence Jones popped into my head. I know that's why it was a nasty tie in there. It made no sense. But I think he was a buyout, or maybe he got waived when we picked him up. I know it was like he got released or something.
Yeah, he got cut for
The
sure.
Pelicans, I think it
Yep,
was before us.
yep.
He had a good career to start out with, and I don't think he shot very well, so that's kind of why maybe he fizzed out. Probably not the best of athlete by that time too. He had some injuries and whatnot, but I was excited to get him. I thought maybe he could help that season. It was kind of that year. I want to say 2017 at least for sure. In 2017, 2018, that might have been Jason Kidd's last year, the second to last year, but in the Jason Kidd era, you're just hoping somebody would help. Oh, this guy could work. I'm not going to name the names because we might use them in future episodes, but there's a revolving door there, and you thought maybe this guy had a chance, but he played probably like 3 games for us. I have no idea. I didn't check. So,
Played three
um,
games. He scored
oh,
0 points.
there you go. Didn't do anything. Um,
I remember that signing like vividly. I was excited. I thought he was
yeah, I thought he'd actually help.
one of the reasons was he was very good in 2K for no reason.
Do
And
you have his stats up right now? Didn't he have like a decent season before that? Like it was not far off from his decent
oh,
years.
he almost, he had in 20 his second year in the league, he averaged 12 points for the Rockets.
Hmm.
Next year he averaged 12, then it was down to 9, and then it was 11, and then he got cut by the Pelicans while averaging 11 and a half.
Yeah.
Signed with the Bucks, played 3 games, played 6 minutes total, 0 for 3, no points, and did not play the next year. He was in the G League, and then he went back to Houston for 2 games. That was it. That was his
Yeah,
career.
I don't know.
I don't fully understand it, but I think he did get kind of out of shape pretty quickly, if I remember. So that
Yeah.
may have played a part in it. But no, I was excited about that move, and then yeah, that meant it did nothing. We didn't even use him. I remember him checking into his first game, like vividly in my head for some reason. I
Yeah.
remember him checking in for the first time, and then he must have checked out real quick after that. Um, but yeah, I actually went with. I guess this is connected to Giannis too, although I wasn't doing it for that reason. Same draft class as Giannis. He showed up a couple times in the doc, not talking or anything, but he was shown on video. Nate Walters, who might be my dad's favorite player from that era. Uh, Owned way too many autograph cards of Nate Walters, which I now own because they are worth nothing. But he did retire from the EuroLeague today, which is why I saw his name pop up. I had to post my mixtape that I made of him during COVID. So that's out there on Twitter. I might retweet that from the Cream City Pod account just to show my wonderful work on the Nate Walters mixtape. So it goes back to I was actually excited about that pick when we made it because I had seen him in March Madness the year before, or that year, I should say. He played Michigan. He was like a big reason. They were a big like upset pick that year was for San Diego State to beat Michigan because Nate Walters had like a 50-point game at one point that year, and he was averaging like 25 or something. He was one of the nation's leading scorers. And So he was fun to watch. And honestly, when you watch his mixtape, you would think he was pretty good. He wasn't. He was not big enough to defend. He shot 29% from three, which if you're a short white point guard, like you gotta shoot better from three than that. He shot 60% from the free throw line for his career, which is insane to me. I would not have guessed that. I would have thought he would at least have been decent from there, but he was actually a good finisher. He was a pretty decent passer. For a second round pick, I mean, it was a worthwhile shot for sure. I enjoyed watching him that year when the team sucked. Like he made some fun plays. He was actually a pretty good like lob partner with Giannis. They had actually decent chemistry right away, which I do remember pretty well. But yeah, he fizzled out pretty quick. He played in a couple other countries, suddenly showed back up in the NBA in 2017, 2018 with the Jazz for 5 games. I think he came in against the Bucks at one point, which was I didn't even know he had returned to the NBA, and all of a sudden Nate Walters was out there against us.
Did he play for that Pelicans too? I feel like I remember that.
He did right after
Yeah, there
us.
you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He I I don't know for sure. No, he wouldn't have been part of that trade. But I don't remember if we cut him or if he
I
got
think we cut
traded.
him, and
Okay.
then they picked him up, and then he might have been out after that.
Yeah, it was like 10 games with the Pelicans, it looks like. But he was just one of, again, a name to remember from, especially from that era of Giannis kind of changing the franchise. Because at one point, Nate Walters started 31 games his rookie season. So I can't imagine a Nate Walters type point guard starting 31 games for the Bucks at this moment. But yeah, just another one. I did enjoy him. I'm not trying to make like he had a really good EuroLeague career. Like he probably made a ton of money playing basketball over the course of his career. So
Hmm.
good for him. Yeah, that's unless you have anything else on Nate Walters, Gunnar. I think we're pretty well wrapped.
Uh, White guy. That's all I got.
Yep. Yes, he was just like us. Uh, for those of you who are still listening as we went long again, please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod. And please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you probably sometime next week.
Yep. See ya.